Hello everyone, welcome to the first ever Insomniak podcast. Alright, not really the first ever one. The other was supposed to be a pilot, but it ended up uploading at the wrong time, but let's pretend that didn't happen. So welcome to the first ever Insomniak podcast. I was reading this story today for a separate video, but I thought it was so good that I had to share it and post it somewhere. So I really hope you enjoy this story. It's one of the best I've ever read, honestly. I hope you all enjoy this story as much as I did narrating it. Remember, give us a good review on iTunes too if you enjoyed it. With that out of the way, I love you all and hope you have a great day. Let's begin. So by this point, everyone is in no doubt to be fully aware of the Area 51 memes and all the hubbub surrounding them. Apparently, over 1 million people are set to storm the perimeter on September 20th of this year. Should be interesting, but let's be honest for a second. I doubt it's gonna happen. Even if we did, even if by some ridiculous miracle they managed to overwhelm the most powerful military on Earth and infiltrate a top secret base, I don't think they'd be exactly thrilled with the results. I'll just come right out and say I guess Area 51's a red herring. It's a distraction, and pretty much always has been. Nothing out there but sand, reclusive scientists and an old lake. I mean, think about it. If Area 51 is one of the most top secret and covert blacklists in the world, how does everyone know about it? How secret can it be if everyone knows the secret? I mean, for frick's sake, even Obama acknowledges its existence. That's the whole point of it. They want you distracted so you don't look for the others. But why take my word for it? Who am I? I'm just some pleb on the internet that decided to cash in on a trend for some clout perhaps, yeah. But no. That may be who I am now, but I was once a person of particular interest to the United States government. Most people know me as Mr. Blue. It's not my real name, but it's much easier to pronounce. I used to be a pilot. I did that for many years, and I loved every second of it. I tell ya, there's nothing quite like soaring through the skies and breaking the sound barrier for the first time. Yeah, you might crap yourself a little, but hey, that's part of the experience, really. Now, unfortunately, the type of work I did is above the top secret, and for all of our safeties, I cannot go into any more detail of who I am or what I did. One day, however, I was out on a classified reconnaissance mission in a certain area I should not have been. Now, I'll apologise here for any vague details of certain things, but you gotta understand, the things I'm about to tell you are beyond top secret. I mean, they'd kill me 10 times over for uttering a word of it. But anyway, the mission's going as planned, when suddenly my instruments start going haywire. Air pressure inside the cabin just plummeted, and the speed and fuel consumption gauges start going crazy. Everything. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. Next thing I know, I see a bright light soar past me at an ungodly speed. The shockwave it produced is so violent that it shredded the whole of my craft in a split second. So I went from casually flying along to suddenly regaining consciousness as I plummeted headfirst towards the ground at terminal velocity. I managed to pull my chute before I splattered, but as I touched down, I almost wished I hadn't. There I was met by an entourage of at least 24 men in winter camo suits and masks. They were all pointing weapons at me and screamed in a language which I recognised as English. I do my best to calm down and appear unthreatening, but that didn't stop them from wrenching me into a pair of handcuffs and hauling me onto their APCs. They began to drive away, and the real severity of the situation hit me. I was not going to be saved. The people I worked for had never said it, but I always known that if you're captured, you're on your own. With that in mind, I had no real incentive to keep my mouth shut once they started the interrogation. It may seem cowardly, but I'm not about to be tortured brutally from a former ally. Yeah, the government says that they don't torture people, but that's what they say. So I told them about who I worked for, what my mission was, why I grew up, all that jazz. It was all fabricated, but they took the bait regardless, thanks to their severe distrust of the Russians at the time. But they were actually pretty cool after that. I mean, they wouldn't leave me in their custody alone, but it was better I was alive than dead for them. They then transported me away from my initial interrogation place into a secure facility nearby. I was blindfolded the whole time. I can now hear rumbling of multiple vehicles, sounds of doors sliding, and the distinct feeling of my stomach dropping. I could tell they've taken me somewhere deep underground. Soon after, I stepped off the elevator and they removed my blindfold. Their leader was a guy with a stern face, a thick black beard and eyes that look etched onto concrete. He wore a black suit with some symbol upon his heart pocket that I don't recognize. He stepped in front of everyone, outstretched his arms while staring at me. "Welcome to your new home." An ever so slight grin stretches across his face as he says it. I glanced down the dismay grey hallways which seemed stretched out further than I could ever imagine in multiple directions. They led me down some hall on the right, past dozens of locked corridors, and the rooms before ushering me into a cell. My handcuffs were removed soon after, and the door slid shut behind me. The same man who had welcomed me to the facility then approaches the window, pushing the intercom. "Welcome to the corporation, Mr. Blue. I don't believe there's any reason why our time spent together should be unfriendly. I apologize for this, but you must realize that this is a necessary precaution we must take." And I nod at him. "Wonderful. We'll see you for dinner soon. If you require anything, just please notify one of the guards outside of your quarters." And with that, he and his little entourage turned and strolled down the hallway. That was my very first night in the facility, which I eventually came to know as FEZ. I don't think it's an official name, but I heard several personnel at the base refer to that by the acronym over the years. I still don't know what it was for. The best I can come up with is Fortified Experimental Zone. It makes the most sense. All things considered, at first it wasn't actually too bad. The staff are nice, the food is great, and there's plenty of things to see around the base. Now they interviewed me probably 100 times after, and were especially interested in the craft I was piloting. The craft in question was one of our new technologies, but unfortunately it was blew to smithereens by the light. It took years of incarceration there, but eventually the staff came to trust me almost as much as they did their own comrades. We would laugh and joke with one another, and soon we might even be considered friends. I became especially close with one of the scientists named Kevin. Kevin was a smart, comical guy and had quite a lot of things explained to me. He and I would spend countless hours talking. He was my only glimpse into what was happening on the outside world. He'd bring in books and movies for us to enjoy together. He'd keep me updated on everything. And over the next 30 years, we'd develop a close friendship that I always treasure. I must have displayed some kind of intellectual potential, because they eventually started asking for my input on various curiosities stationed throughout the base. They only did it because I'd sworn to them complete loyalty, that I'd never be allowed to leave the base anyway. The base itself is colossal. They always blindfolded me during transports by any location, but one time I caught a glimpse of the buttons in the elevator. There had to be at least 50 of them. I remember the first time they showed me one of the lockdown blocks. There were guard posts at every cell. I heard some very strange noises emanating around me as we transversed the halls. I thought for sure that they were about to show me some horrendous beast from the depths of hell, and prepared myself for the according howls of unseen things through the halls. Now the lead scientist rolled back a two-way mirror, and my heart frozen with anticipation. In the cell block in front of us, there's nothing more than a human girl in a grey jumpsuit. She's maybe 5 years old or so, but nothing out of the ordinary. I told the doctor what's going on, and he raises his eyebrows before pressing a button, and I heard the sound of a gas seep into the room. A few tense seconds passed, when the girl suddenly shrieked a little. Her head tilted back, and I saw jagged, needle-like teeth emerge from her mouth. Her jet black eyes then lurched towards us, and she lunges at the window. She struck it hard and fell into the ground, snarling and hissing like some terrible beast. You ever seen anything like that? All I can do is shake my head. I've never seen anything like it before. They found her in the woods outside of Whitehorse with a freshly disemboweled man. She was eating him, and she appeared unaffected by the sub-zero temperatures. I suddenly feel like vomiting, but I said nothing. I only stared back at the unusually gruesome little girl. What the hell is she? Unfortunately, I was never told anything else about her. I doubt the personnel knew much anyways. They came to show me a lot of very strange things over the years. A giant brownish orange-haired primate that walked upright and seemed to respond to facial movements. A humanoid-shaped being that was only detectable via infrared cameras. A golden chest that would instantly kill anything that touched it, and a 10-foot tall creature wrapped in vines that emitted bouts of radiation and blended into the environment with perfect camo. There's a monstrous fish, at least 80 feet in length, frozen in nitrogen. Various apparent creatures that I'm guessing are the results of relentless genetic tempering. I've never seen anything like it. All of the monsteries housed there, and the secrets buried in their possession. They also asked for my advice on certain paradoxical phenomenon that had plagued them as well. They tell me that for decades there had been hundreds of unsolved cases of human disappearances that defied all explanations. Young children were found on cliff edges that they could not have reached, while old and frail people would be discovered dozens of miles away from where they started only hours later. Many not found though. I could almost see the fear from their eyes as they relay case after case of recordings and other things. And it was clear, although not said, that they have no idea what the cause is. Unfortunately, neither do I, as it was the first time I'd ever heard of the bizarre phenomenon. I told them honestly that I didn't believe my former allies were responsible, but I don't know if that made them feel worse or not. Throughout the years there, I had always found one particular thing weird. After all the weird and terrifying things they showed me, there's never a mention of extraterrestrials. That's why everyone thinks these black site facilities are there, but nobody mentioned it. That made me smile a bit when I thought about it, because they had no idea how close they were. The closest thing they had was this weird tentacle creature with a rigid set of teeth in its mouth. almost an eel, but possessed for weird eyes in a ring around its head. You'd think it'd live in the water, but it didn't. That was what threw me off about it. It slithered around the ground in a very swift and very unsettling motion. They said its DNA resembled nothing like anything they've ever seen before, much like RNA, hence the reason they believed. But we're not certain of where it come from. Kevin and I got talking back in his quarters one night as the rest of the crew retired for the evening. He shared with me a bit of his brandy, and we were content to chat as though we're friends late into the night. He tells me about himself and things that he's never mentioned before. He showed me his wife and his son that had been taken from him. Kevin admitted that his son died in a car crash years back, and his wife unfortunately died of cancer years later. It broke my heart to hear that, and I felt sorrow for him some 30 years later. Kevin was in his early 50s, but you'd never know it with the enthusiasm in his voice. It was during the conversation, Kevin ended up mentioning something I find interesting. He told me that he believed that if an alien species existed, they're advanced enough to traverse a galactic canopy and reach Earth. Then obviously they're going to be quite intelligent also. He said he didn't believe in any of the Hollywood depictions of doomsday where aliens come to destroy us. He thought they'd be more subtle than that. Think about it. You find some intelligent creatures which present almost no threat to you, and the first thing you're going to do is try and kill it? That'd be a waste, no. And no species that fancies themselves as an advanced being would be so brash. At least I hope they wouldn't. He chuckled slightly and shot me a knowing look mixed with a unique intrigue that glistened in his grey eyes. Even if they thought we were destroying our own planet or something, why do they care? They're trillions of miles away, and there's trillions of other planets in our Milky Way alone. They could pick off any one of them if they wanted resources. I chuckled to myself, almost foreseeing where the conversation's heading. It's not the planets they're after, I replied. Kevin snapped and pointed his finger at me and his face lights up. Exactly. They'd want to study us, learn about us how we do other things. Kevin's hand moves erratically now. They'd probably learn about us, then we'd learn more about ourselves too. I mean, granted, they'd have to be more intelligent. They could learn up close, understand how we work. No need for bloodshed when they could simply, inconspicuously integrate into human culture. They have no doubt mastered the art of altering their biology to disguise themselves. I mean, that's nothing when compared to the tech they use here, you know. He paused from his entranced monologue and wiped off the stream from his glasses. I just sit back, intent to let him continue. As I found it fascinating that he could know so much. Aliens, they're not warlords, they're poets, architects, authors, musicians, beings that wish to create. It is the ultimate calling from the entity so powerful. Kevin took a deep breath and revealed his own explanation. His speech had turned a bit slurred. His eyes are somewhat lazily floating. He then met his eyes in a look that I'd never seen him give before. It was as though he seemed to have lost all sense of formality and ready to propose a question which he had long wanted to ask. You're not really from Russia, are you? The sudden accusation caught me off guard. I don't know what to say. You had everyone fooled. I mean, I was too for the longest time. You had a suitable backstory, authentic accent, and the alias you gave us checked out. He paused and clasped his hands in front of him. You look so authentic too, but there was one thing you missed. One thing you can't fake. That night your craft was shot down. What were you doing here, Kevin? And I maintained a prolonged lock of eye contact before I finally responded. Well, reconnaissance. And for the first time in decades, I dropped the Russian accent. It was clear that there was no longer any reason to lie to my friend. And what did you see, Kevin? Staring into my eyes. Beauty, poetry, creatures like us. Kevin just stared at me for the longest time, as though he was there weighing my soul in his mind. I wondered what he planned. Eventually he smiled and rose to make his way to the cell door. He reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a black steel pistol with a long snout. Mr. Blue, do you want to go home? I nodded after pausing for a moment. I hope your allies can forgive us. Without another word, he flashed his security badge on the locks on the doorway. He mentioned for me to rise and follow, so I do. Kevin glanced back and forth down the hallway, but due to the late hour, no one's around. He and I sprinted down the corridor and onwards to one of the security booths. He flashes his badge as I hid out of sight. He entered his room and I heard noises, like a brief scuffle before two bright flashes ended it. Kevin now re-emerges with wild eyes, beckoning to me to follow. He and I dash down the hallway and reach a massive mineshaft elevator soon after. Now finally, for the first time, I enter without a blindfold. Kevin punches in the security code and powers it up. Security system will be down for a good half hour, but automated distress beacons have already been activated, and that gives us about 8 minutes. Kevin drops the clip from his pistol, popping in a fresh one. I see speckles of blood on his eyes. He's in a frenzy state. Here, take this. He reaches out his hand and held something which I haven't seen in decades. The old radio from my craft. I took it. We meet eyes at the door to the elevator. It was back to running after that, but after a few minutes of it, we reached an underground parking facility. Kevin unlocks a nearby vehicle, and the two of us hopped in as he fires it up. The engine roars to life. Kevin and I accelerate through. A moment later, we exit the facility. God, and I see my first vision of the night sky in over 4 decades. There were men stationed at the perimeter gates attempting to stop us, but he don't even flinch. He crashes right through the fence on the perimeter, causing multiple lights to activate in our wake. I hear sirens now and the silhouettes of people dashing. There's a suit in the back, put it on. I do so, without question, and fit in the snug polyester garment. I covered every square inch of my neck around that thing, and it feels incredibly comfortable. There's a dial on your right side. You can use it to mask your body heat. They're gonna be after you. He tossed a map into my lap and continued barking instructions. You can contact your friends on that radio, right? His eyes flashed to me as he slid onto the main road and away from the compound. Yeah, Kevin nodded. Make your way north. They won't be expecting that. There's a river up there about 30 miles away from the forest. Once you find it, head east until you find a small town. Ask the guy at the post office for Mr. White. He's a friend of mine who's agreed to help you. He'll take it from there. I tried to digest the flow of information as best as I can to remain confident. It had all happened so suddenly. I stashed you some MREs in that bag. Should last you a good couple of weeks. Kevin then swerved around the corner to reorientate us onto a new dark road. I have an influx of adrenaline. A sudden thought occurred to me. What's gonna happen to you though? Kevin didn't seem to want to acknowledge the question. Forget about it. Just get back to your own people, okay? Behind us is a flurry of lights, suddenly ascending into the night sky. The whirly sound of rotary blades is all I can hear. Ah, I had hoped that I could get you a bit further than this. He suddenly slams on the brakes. My head lurches forward and the car spun back and forth along an icy road. Here, take this too. Handing over the long-barreled pistol. I hesitantly take it. Then our eyes meet for one final time. This is where we say goodbye, Mr. Blue. Why? Why are you doing this for me? Kevin lets out a sigh, staying silent for a moment, and only when the sounds of approaching engines grew louder, he says, You don't belong here. You don't belong in a cage. I don't know where you come from, but I want you to see your loved ones again. I know I can't. His eyes begin to water as he jolted his neck before looking at me one final time. I hope you don't think of us as captors or kidnappers. I hope you see us as you see yourself. I hope you can just understand. A single tear then rolled down his cheeks, and I put my hand on his shoulder. I always have, and I always will. Thank you, Kevin. I held out my hand, and he grabbed it tight as we shared one final moment before I venture into the blizzard. The journey from then on was long and arduous, with me spending weeks trudging through snow and frozen forests. Hounds, men, machines pursue me for days, but somehow I elude them. The terrain is truly brutal, unrelenting, but eventually I managed to find the river which Kevin has mentioned to me. By this point, all of my pursuers had long gone silent, and I followed the river and found the town, and soon after, the man known as Mr. White. He was a kind man, gladly inviting me into his house to avoid the agents. It is there that I've been ever since, awaiting Ali's arrival. They were stunned to hear me again, but not as stunned as I was to find out the radio still works. They weren't entirely sure whether they could trust me anymore, but I didn't give them a choice. I threatened to go public and expose them to the world, and they finally agree, but mention it's months before they can reach me. I expect as much, and thankfully Mr. White allowed me to stay with him and wait for their arrival. I found out soon that my dear friend Kevin, to whom I owe my life and freedom, has been found deceased. The authorities ruled it a suicide, gunshot wounds around the back of the head, but obviously I had my doubts. It truly broke me to learn about one of my true friends' demises, but I knew it was what he expected. I like to think that this is why he chose to do it, and furthermore, it is the reason I'm posting here now. Kevin's legacy deserves to live on, and this is the only way I know how to do it. And with that, we have come full circle to this message you're reading right now to address the original topic. Area 51 is indeed a reuse. Kevin had a lot of power in his previous role and told me about all the operations. The real prize is FEZ, my former prison, somewhere in Alaska, buried beneath mountains of snow. Kevin was a smart, brilliant man. If you've ever managed to make it this far, then I'd like you to think that you're someone like him, brave, curious, with an almost innate sense of wonder that cannot be satisfied. It is my hope that Kevin's ideas will live on through you. My allies would never approve of the message, but that's not the point. The truth is something that all sentient beings should be allowed to perceive, despite how unpleasant it may be. It was Kevin's belief that the beings he knows as aliens are already there, that instead of murdering humans, as is often portrayed in stories, they would blend in, take keen interest in human culture and society, write books and poetry in the hopes of connecting to something truly extraordinary. If Kevin is right, then maybe one day you'll even stumble upon such a story yourself. Maybe you'll think that it's nothing more than a work of fiction either. Maybe the author said theoretical story would seem like nothing more than your run-of-the-mill internet user. He probably wouldn't come right out and say it, because that would be entirely too corny. He would probably just leave you the pieces and hope you can put them together. Maybe you are truly like Kevin, drawn to mystery and prepared to entertain the fantastic. Maybe you'll dismiss the implications of the words before you because you don't dare believe in something so outlandish. Because in the end, truth is not the problem, belief is. Maybe someone will understand who, or more importantly, what I really am. Maybe it will be you. Either way, I've been away for a very long time. It's time for me to go home now. Thank you, Kevin. I will always uphold our agreement.